Alright, here is the M18 out of the 1811. And as I said, the previous owner's concern or diagnosis for the hard to start issue and hard to crank issue was that the starter was weak. And so when we pulled it, we assumed, we're just going to replace the starter. Well, replace the starter and it still wouldn't crank for crap. So I pulled the plugs, again, looked down in the bore, didn't see a bunch of rust or anything strange down in there, but as I said, these plugs are really clean, and overall, this engine looked pretty clean and leak-free. I mean, it's kind of dirty, but, you know, for a mag with 1,200 plus hours, this looked pretty leak-free. You know, especially if you look down in the cooling fin area, you know, there wasn't a bunch of build up in there. Typically crank seals will go on these and then they start getting wild. So I was wondering what was going on with it, and the more I started to mess with it, the more I realized somebody's been in here, and that's why the plugs were so clean. So I got it to start and run, and I'm going to go over what happened. I labeled the engines when I pull them so I know what's going on because I have several of these laying around. So runs, it's got good compression, so we checked compression on both cylinders. We got about 105-ish, almost 110 on both cylinders, so looking pretty good there. The carb needs work, but that says block cracked. Yes, it does. So I started disassembling things to figure out why it was hard to turn over. Someone had been in here and mangled the shroud to try to get the starter, to the starter bolt, I assume. I don't know, but the shroud was actually rubbing on the starter. So I removed that tin, put the starter on, still wouldn't crank very well. So I removed both of the cylinder heads and checked in there, and now it's put back together so I could see it run, but there was really nothing obvious that was wrong. Now what I did see when I went in was someone had been in there and been a little heavy-handed with the cleaning. I see one cylinder had been bored, and looks like one cylinder has a new piston. And this engine has not run very long since whatever work was done. And then I removed the PTO clutch, and I just started putting it back together. And I was going to put it back together, and then I saw this here. So that is scoring and rubbing all along this rotor here. And if we look in here, I don't know if I can get my light to shine in there right, you can see scoring and rubbing back in there too. So something went wrong with the reassembly of the PTO, and I think the reason it was hard to crank to begin with was there was a mechanical interference here. Somebody has replaced the factory pin. I was going to show you the factory, or the factory key, which maybe has fallen out now. Maybe I took it out. Oh, here it is. So again, somebody's been in there. This is some non-factory key that somebody put in there. But when I took the PTO off and put the cylinder heads back on, it started to crank just fine. And I was like, whew, I thought it was locked up, because it would get about half a rotation and then it would get tight. And then it would loosen up and then it'd get tight. So I figured it was a rotating assembly issue, and it wasn't. So I'm not going to put the PTO back on yet, but I wanted to test it and see what the deal was. So the worst part about this is that I found this. Yeah, so anywhere that they've been on this engine, they've got the gray Permatex on it. So I know the jugs have been off. I know that the closure plate over here has been off. And then I saw this, which is a crack in the block. So it's cracked pretty severely, and they did a really piss poor job of trying to do something about it. I think they gobbed some silicone on there and they didn't even get it up to, let's see if I can get the light in here better. Sorry about the shakiness. Yeah, they didn't even really get to this area of the crack right here. They just kind of gobbed it up and threw it in there. So we're going to have to do something about that. But it does crank, it does start, it does run. And I think I'm going to show it on camera now just so you guys can hear what it does. Maybe if it doesn't make a fool out of me. Let's see. Oh yeah, she's gonna go. Yeah, I said it needed carb work, it does. So a little bit of carburation work, but it's running. So, I'm going to shut it off. It does run, but we got a block that's cracked. Yay! Cracked block. So, haven't decided exactly how far we're going to go with this one yet. I might just try to repair the crack and rebuild the carb and just see what it does. Definitely not putting it back in the frame yet. We're going to be building some harnesses for engine swaps on these tractors this week. So I want to use this 82 series, technically not an 82 series, whatever you want to call it, as a demonstration unit for how to install our command swap harness. So that's why this is in the shop now. We got the engine out of the way so we can kind of show how things work. And yeah. This is why you never pay full price for a non-running tractor. It's not because you're being cheap, it's because you're being smart. You just don't know, and somebody has been all over this thing. So, we got it to move, it's not dead.